Hi there, folks. Today we're looking at odds and probability, so the difference between these two things. So probability we've already dealt with, and probability was how likely it is for something to occur, and we would find the probability by doing the number of favorable outcomes over the total number of outcomes. And odds is very similar to that, but instead of describing the likelihood in terms of the total number of possibilities, we describe the likelihood based on favorable versus unfavorable. Okay? So odds describes the likelihood of an event by comparing the favorable and unfavorable outcomes. And again, that's a very slight difference from probability. Probability was favorable versus the total. Odds is favorable versus unfavorable. So odds in favor of an event, we list the favorable first, and then we list the unfavorable. And we list it in kind of this ratio type of format. And this is the same thing as expressing a fraction, but really, we don't express it as a fraction so that we don't get it confused with probability. So if the favorable to unfavorable was 1 to 2, instead of writing 1 over 2, we write 1 and then a colon and then a 2. It's the same as writing a fraction, but it's just a different way of expressing that ratio, okay? Odds against an event, basically we just flip those around. So I list the unfavorable first and then the favorable, okay? And again, instead of doing what we want over the total, it's what we want versus what we don't want. And then odds against is what we don't want versus what we do want. We just switch the order, okay? For example, here it says, what are the odds of landing on a number greater than or equal to 6? So in this scenario, think of this like a spinner, like we've got a little thing on here and we flick it and it spins around, all right, and then lands on one of these guys, all right? That's the situation that we're talking about here. And so if I flick that spinner, the odds of it landing on a number greater than or equal to 6, so numbers that are greater than or equal to 6 would be the 6, the 7, and the 8. And so if we were to think of this for a second, if we think about probability of the event, so let me just think about probability for a second, just to show you the difference. So the probability that the number is greater than or equal to 6 would be 3 out of the total number of possibilities, which would be 8. Okay, but odds are slightly different. We say the odds, we still start with the 3. There's 3 ways that I can get what I want. But then instead of saying there's 3 ways I can get what I want over the total of 8, we say if there's 3 ways I can get what I want, what's left is that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ways that I could get something that I don't want. So the odds are 3 to 5. Okay, that's the slight difference here. Instead of saying 3 out of the total, we say 3 versus the other stuff. It's 3 to 5 instead of 3 out of 8. Okay, that's the slight difference between odds and probability. All right, using a similar example. So we've got our spinner all set up again. What are the odds against landing on a number less than 3? So numbers that are less than 3 would be the 2 and the 1. Okay, so the odds of landing on a number less than 3 would be 2 to 6, because there's 2 ways I can get what I want and 6 ways that I could get something other than what I want. But this says odds against, so I list the unfavorable first. So I just list it as 6 to 2 instead. Okay, so odds of landing on a number less than 3 would be 2 to 6. Odds against that would be 6 to 2. I just flip it around. But now because I could express this as a fraction, I have to reduce it just like I would a fraction. Each of these are divisible by 2, so I rewrite it as 3 to 1. Okay? Again, a very slight difference between odds and probability. All right? This one, what are the odds of landing on an even number? So I need to count up all the even numbers. We've got this guy, this one, and this one. So the odds of landing on an even number would be 4. There's 4 of those. The odds of anything else occurring, of not landing on an even number, would be everything else, would be these 4 that are left. So the odds of landing on an even number are 4 to 4. When I reduce it, it's 1 to 1. Okay, and when we talk about odds, like here, we'd say the odds of landing on an even number are even. So when there's just as likely of a possibility of getting what I want versus what I don't want, we say the odds are even. So 1 to 1, or when the odds are even, really what that is showing us is it's showing us, because the odds are 1 to 1, that the probability of getting what I want versus getting something that I don't want are the same. Okay, and so odds give us more of a comparison of the probabilities than they do actually give us probabilities themselves. All right, favorable versus unfavorable. In this one, we want to know if the probability of an event is 7 out of 13, what are the odds of the event? So again, we got to kind of think about what probability is, all right? So when we think about probability, that's 7 over 13. This is the favorable outcomes, right? That's what I want. And this is the total number of outcomes, okay? So as we start to think about converting that to odds, remember, odds isn't favorable in total, it's favorable versus unfavorable. So the odds of this event would be 7, because that's the favorable outcomes. But now I have to think about it. If there's 7 favorable outcomes and there's 13 total outcomes, that means there are 6 outcomes that don't give me what I want. So this would be 7 to 6. Okay, so we have to kind of think about these things literally mean. If there's 13 total options, 7 of them are what I want, that means there's 6 that give me something that I don't want. If I look at this one, it says the odds of an event occurring are 3 to 1. Now what's the probability? So again, start with odds. The odds are 3 to 1. This is favorable. And this is unfavorable. And so in other words, there's 3 ways I can get what I want, and there's 1 way that I could get something other than what I want. So when I think about probability, probability is the favorable, it's what I want, which is the 3, but now over the total. And so start thinking about the total. If there's 3 good things that could happen and 1 bad thing that could happen, there are a total of 4 things that could happen. So the probability is 3 out of 4. Okay? Again, there's a very slight difference between these things, but we want to make sure we understand the difference between on versus probability. If the odds against an event occurring are 5 to 7, what is the probability of the event occurring? So again, once again, just think about what odds means. So here's odds against the event, which means this is the unfavorable listed first. And then these are the favorable outcomes listed second. Okay, so now if I want the probability of the event, the probability of that thing happening is favorable over total. So looking at the odds, I can see the favorable outcomes would be 7. And now if there's 7 ways I could get what I want, according to the odds, there's 5 ways that I could get something other than I want. That's a total of 12 different options. So it's 7 out of 12. Okay. And now kind of mixing all this together, just bouncing back and forth between the two. A bag contains 2 blue, 5 red, and 3 orange cubes. 1 is pulled from the bag. What's the probability of blue? So the probability, remember, is what I want over the total. So there are 2 blue out of a total of 10 marbles, and that reduces to 1/5. So that's the probability, okay? Odds against blue, all right? So there are 2 ways I could get what I want, which is the blue. There are 8 ways that I could get something other than what I want. So in this case, I want to list the 8 first. So it's 8 to 2, which of course I want to rewrite as 4 to 1. Okay, that's the odds. The probability of red, so there are 5 red out of 10 total, which is 1/2. And then the odds of red, there once again are 5 red, so there's 5 ways I can get what I want. But then comparing that to the other stuff, there are 5 ways that I could get something other than what I want. So now the probability is 1 to 1. Or sorry, the odds are 1 to 1. Okay? So again, that slight difference. Probability is what we want over the total. Odds are what we want versus what we don't want. And if we say odds against, we just switch it. It's what we don't want versus what we do want. Okay? A very slight difference. They're similar, but they're different. Okay?